Hello, beautiful, and welcome back to this channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Amy Colibri, and on this channel, we learn how to heal, transform, and become more of our authentic selves using spirituality, psychology, and creativity. So if you've clicked on this video, you're probably healing from something difficult. Maybe it's a breakup, a loss, a betrayal, or any situation that feels difficult for you. And you're doing what feels like all the right things. You're putting in effort. You're being intentional, and you're learning so much. But what if some of the strategies you're using to cope are actually slowing down your healing? That's why I want to share these 5 strategies with you, because once you can start to recognize them, you can begin to redirect your energy towards what is actually going to help you heal a lot faster. Looking back, these strategies or coping responses probably added years onto my own healing journey. They felt so healthy and productive at the time, but they actually kept me stuck in these patterns that prevented me from processing what I actually needed to process and move forward. And recently, I caught myself again, red-handed. I thought I was processing something difficult so well. I was journaling, researching, analyzing, and making sense of so much. I felt incredibly aware, like I was really growing. But as I was explaining my process to someone I really trusted, I became overwhelmed with emotion and my eyes filled up with tears. I was completely surprised. I was becoming an expert in understanding and explaining my situation while completely avoiding how I actually felt about it. In this video, I'm going to share 5 coping strategies that seem healthy and productive on the surface, but can actually slow down our healing process significantly. These are so subtle and feel so legitimate that you might not even recognize you're using them. I'll share what each one looks like, why they slow down healing, how to recognize it in yourself, and what actually helps. There's one strategy in particular that feels incredibly sneaky because it feels like love, hope, and connection, but can actually keep you emotionally attached to someone or something that needs to be let go of. Quick note before we dive in, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm sharing with you what I've learned from my own healing journey. If you're dealing with serious mental health concerns, please reach out to a qualified professional. If you recognize yourself in any of these, please don't shame yourself or feel bad. Don't do it. Don't do it. No, don't do it. These coping strategies developed as intelligent responses when we were smaller than a chair. They literally helped us survive. They're how we've unconsciously learned how to manage our nervous system when activated by internal or external triggers. Activated meaning that restless, buzzing energy that comes up when we're feeling overwhelmed or upset about something. We all have many coping strategies that we know how to use well. I don't think any human being is above this. The goal isn't to eliminate these strategies completely. The point is to become more aware of when we're using them or when we want to use them, so we have the choice to choose consciously rather than react automatically. The first coping strategy that slows down your healing is intellectualizing or analyzing as a way of emotional avoidance. This is trying to think your way through an emotional situation by researching, analyzing, and essentially staying up in your head. What it looks like: constantly researching concepts and topics related to your situation, whether it's psychology, relationship advice, workplace dynamics, family patterns, or whatever explains what you're going through. Using understanding as a way to avoid feeling difficult emotions. Creating frameworks and systems to manage emotional chaos instead of sitting with uncertainty. Overanalyzing another person's psychology or yours instead of processing your own hurt. As you might be able to guess, I personally love this strategy as a way to avoid feeling. My goodness. Even in making this video, I had to check in with myself. Am I intellectualizing to avoid some feelings, or is this a healthy way of processing? And I've learned to trust my own discernment here. For me, making creative content is a healthy way to integrate. Just this self-awareness alone is part of the healing process, part of my healing process. And I think that we'll always have to be really aware of what strategies we tend to use. But boy, did I do this big time after a breakup last winter. I became fascinated with personality theory, attachment theory, shadow work, astrology, any sort of psychological framework that could help me understand why being together was so difficult and why the aftermath was just as challenging. It felt way safer to be in my head about what I was experiencing rather than to just process the raw grief of the loss. And feeling grief is an incredibly difficult thing to open up and surrender to. This stretched my healing process from months to almost a year. Understanding is important, but when it becomes a substitute for feeling, it keeps us stuck in our heads instead of moving through our emotions. Emotional healing happens in the body. When we intellectualize painful experiences, we create this illusion of progress and of feeling while actually avoiding the emotional processing that would naturally lead to genuine resolution. Plus, all of this mental energy that's spent on researching and analyzing is now not available for being present in your life and for your relationships. How to recognize this in yourself. Perhaps you're constantly researching topics and concepts instead of feeling your emotions. Or you have extensive knowledge about your situation but still feel emotionally stuck. You can explain their behavior perfectly but haven't processed your own hurt. And what it can feel like in the body as a felt sense is perhaps your breathing gets shallow when you start researching, or you hold tension in your face or body while analyzing. What actually helps? Before doing another search online, try taking 3 deep breaths and asking yourself, what am I actually feeling beneath all this thinking? Instead of researching to understand more, make some sacred space for yourself to sit with these big feelings of grief, loss, disappointment, frustration, whatever they are. The understanding can come later, after you've processed these emotions. The second coping strategy that can slow down your healing is the one I mentioned at the beginning of this video. It feels like love, hope, and connection. And to me, it is the most insidious and sneaky one of them all because it just feels so darn subtle. This strategy is using fantasy as a way of emotional avoidance. Here, we use our imagination to avoid processing difficult emotions about what's actually happening around us in our lives. Fantasy can comfort and protect us. It can help us dream bigger for ourselves, but it becomes problematic when it keeps us emotionally attached to someone or something that we need to process and release. What it looks like. Imagining perfect conversations where they finally get it. Having rescue fantasies where someone will fix or save the situation. Having mental rehearsals of ideal outcomes where everything works out. Or idealizing potential rather than accepting reality. I've used this strategy so many times, inadvertently sabotaging my own healing process. I remember after a relationship ended, months after, I started to fantasize that their car was coming up my driveway to my house. I could almost hear their car. And this happened many times during the relationship after a fight. For about a week, I was imagining them at any moment coming up to my door to talk things through and make everything better again. And as I was imagining this, I could feel my hope, my anger, my heartbeat quickening at the thought of the intensity of it all, as if it were really happening. But what I realized now was that that time spent in hope, anger, and fantasy was time that I did not spend grieving what was not going to happen. It was up to me to take care of myself now. That fantasy was keeping me emotionally tied to the idea of us that entire week, instead of just processing the loss. Why this slows down healing? Fantasy keeps you emotionally tethered to the trigger source, whether that's a situation, a person, or even a need that you have that's not being met. It keeps you stuck, imagining how things could be different instead of processing how you feel about what happened or is happening now. Instead of moving through difficult emotions towards resolution, or perhaps by setting healthy boundaries that are needed, feelings are avoided by staying attached to what could happen. The nervous system feels hopeful instead of completing disappointment cycles, which then prevents natural emotional integration. How to recognize this in yourself. You catch yourself mentally rehearsing conversations, or you spend more time imagining different outcomes than processing what actually happened. You feel temporarily better after fantasizing, but then need to do it again when reality starts to creep back in. You have trouble making decisions to leave situations because you're attached to the potential. And what it can feel like in the body as a felt sense is fantasizing feels light, floaty, and energizing in the body, like a brief daydream, while grief can feel heavy, grounded, and settling. So if and when you can catch yourself having a fantasy, bring your attention back to your breath and come back into your body by maybe imagining your feet on the ground or beneath you. And ask yourself, am I avoiding pain or taking action by staying hopeful? What would it feel like to grieve what actually happened rather than imagining what could happen? Can I accept this person or situation as they actually are instead of who I wish they were? Maybe instead of imagining conversations, write it out. Write down how you wish this conversation could go, and then burn it or bury it, or try calling a friend to come sit and listen with you without having to fix anything. The third coping strategy that can slow down our healing is people pleasing. That is focusing on managing other people's emotions instead of processing our own. Now, I'm not talking about people-pleasing tendencies in general. I'm talking specifically about using people-pleasing to cope when feeling overwhelmed or activated by a particular situation that you're trying to heal from. This strategy actually looks like being a really caring, considerate person. It can feel meaningful and it can get you praise and validation from others. But it can become a way of avoiding difficult emotions by focusing on everybody else's. What it looks like: feeling responsible for everyone's comfort during conflicts, or making your healing timeline about others' needs, or prioritizing others' feelings over your own boundaries, or managing situations before anyone even asks, or explaining or justifying your decisions to avoid conflict. My most recent experience with this strategy was around dance classes that my ex-partner and I used to attend together. After we had been broken up for a while, I wanted to start going back. When I did, I became hyper-focused on making sure everyone in our shared community felt really comfortable about what was happening between us. I tried to manage conversations and share careful information with mutual friends and really try to control how others perceived what was happening. It felt like I was being so aware and considerate, taking care of everyone's feelings and making sure no one was uncomfortable. But all that energy I spent trying to manage other people's emotions was energy I wasn't spending processing my own hurt and disappointment, and perhaps my own unreadiness to rejoin the classes. Focusing on everybody else's comfort became a sophisticated way to avoid sitting with my own difficult feelings. Focusing our mental energy on managing others' emotional responses to our situation keeps us externally focused when healing requires us to turn within. Plus, it can create a pattern where we need others to feel comfortable before we can move forward with our own healing. And over time, people can sort of sense when you're not being authentic to your own needs, which can actually damage the very relationships you're trying to protect. How to recognize this in yourself. You feel anxious or responsible when others are upset, even about unrelated situations. Or you have trouble saying no when overwhelmed. And what it can feel like in the body as a felt sense is maybe your chest gets tight when someone seems uncomfortable with your choices or healing process. For example, you're trying to heal from a difficult conversation with your mom. Your friend calls upset about their relationship. So you spend the entire call focused on making them feel better, completely avoiding your own feelings about the mom situation. What actually helps? Notice your body's response as you scan for other people's emotions near you. Maybe you feel an energy shift, or that your breathing pattern changes, or you feel tense or hot. However anxiety manifests for you. Try placing one hand on your heart or on your belly and taking 3 long, deep breaths, and ask yourself, What do I actually need right now? Am I managing other people's emotions right now, or am I consciously choosing to help? It is okay to let others have their own emotional responses while you focus on your own healing. The fourth coping strategy that can slow down healing is information gathering. So when our nervous system becomes activated, instead of turning that attention and energy inward to process and feel our emotions, we turn it outward and we begin to track and monitor someone else's life. This is different than intellectualizing because you're not researching concepts. You're gathering current information about a person or situation that you're trying to heal from. What it looks like. So this could be checking social media to see what your ex is up to, or asking mutual friends for updates or information. It could be driving by places where you might see them, or keeping track of their schedule or routine patterns. Perhaps having hypervigilance around their activities or whereabouts. This strategy played out for me around those same dance classes I mentioned. I was constantly trying to determine if he would be at certain dance events instead of building my capacity to handle not knowing, to handle the raw discomfort of uncertainty. I would ask friends to help me find out if he was going to particular events. I wanted the dance teacher to let me know if she had spoken to him. I really didn't want to interact with him, but I wanted to dance. This kept me focused on managing the situation logistically, rather than sitting with the anxiety and the disappointment of no longer knowing. It gave me the illusion of control while avoiding my vulnerability in just showing up and seeing what would happen. It was very sneaky of my unconscious. When we focus our mental energy on tracking someone else's life, again, we're not focusing enough on ourselves. Plus, this can maintain an unhealthy emotional attachment to someone we need to move through our feelings about. It's like trying to heal a wound that we're constantly picking at. How to recognize this in yourself. Perhaps you find yourself actively looking for updates about them, or you feel temporarily relieved when you get more information, but then need more. You may call it staying aware, but it feels anxious rather than peaceful. And what it can feel like in the body as a felt sense is perhaps you hold your breath while scrolling, or you feel that restless, buzzing energy in your body when you reach for your phone to open up a social media app. So feel that restless energy in your body. Ask yourself, is gathering this information actually helping me feel safer, or is it keeping me activated? Am I trying to control something I actually can't control? What would it feel like to sit with not knowing? And sometimes the healthiest choice is to step back from a situation until you feel neutral about it. There's no need to rush into it and face your fears until you've done a good amount of emotional healing. But if you do choose to engage, practice building your capacity to handle uncertainty rather than gathering information. You could try showing up without knowing what will happen. The discomfort of not knowing is temporary, but the confidence you build in facing uncertainty lasts. And this is proven true in my own experience. And the final coping strategy that slows down your healing is particularly seductive because it uses the language of growth and of healing. It sounds so wise and evolved that it can fool even the most self-aware of people. And this is spiritual bypassing as emotional avoidance. John Wellwood, who coined the term, defines spiritual bypassing as using spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. But I'm also adding to this coping strategy meaning-making overdrive, and that is rushing to find deeper purpose and lessons in painful experiences before doing the emotional processing. What it looks like. Using spiritual concepts to avoid or transcend difficult emotions. Rushing to forgiveness to skip anger. Making everything about growth and lessons to avoid feeling hurt. Or turning every interaction into spiritual lessons or psychological insights. Or looking for signs, synchronicities, or deeper meanings to avoid accepting surface reality. I know this one intimately. When I was 25, I lost both my parents in a motorcycle accident. And at that time, I was really into Abraham Hicks and the law of attraction, and they teach a lot of positivity and about manifestation, and they teach that there's no such thing as death, that we're all pure positive energy. There are no accidents. And when we lose our loved ones, they wouldn't want us to be sad. They would want us to be happy and to affirm our lives. So when my parents died, of course I was shocked and devastated, and I cried plenty, but I believed that part of them on some level was ready to go. And so there was a divine timing to it. And I believed that they knew we would be okay. So therefore we would be. And since I was the older sister, I felt I had to be extra strong. And I chose to focus on gratitude and on my spiritual connection with them. And I didn't grieve properly. It took me a very long time to realize this, but many, many, many years later, 7 years later, I think, I realized I had a lot of healing to catch up on. Under all my spiritual beliefs and language, it was actually a sophisticated way of avoiding the overwhelming feelings of devastation and loss. When we rush to make meaning or find spiritual lessons, we deprive ourselves of honoring having our genuine human experience. This prevents us from fully healing, and also perhaps from developing real resilience and emotional maturity, because we're not allowing ourselves to fully experience our emotions and learn from them. How to recognize this in yourself. You immediately look for spiritual meaning when something painful happens, or you turn difficult experiences into lessons before feeling the emotions. You use phrases like, everything happens for a reason, or I'm grateful for this lesson, when you're actually still hurting. Or you judge your own lower emotions as unspiritual or signs that you're not evolved enough. So when something painful happens and you find yourself immediately making meaning from it, ask yourself, am I trying to spiritualize this to avoid feeling hurt? What if this just sucks and doesn't need to mean anything right now? What would it feel like to just be angry or sad without needing wisdom from it? And then make yourself some sacred space to sit with whatever is coming up without having to make any meaning from it, without having to understand it at all. Sometimes painful experiences just have to be felt fully before any wisdom or growth can emerge. And the meaning making can come later, after we've honored our human emotional experience. And here's something really important. If you're not ready for fully feeling right now, or when that moment arises for you again, that's okay too. Maybe just do your best to choose regulation techniques that don't keep you attached to the situation that you're trying to heal from. Maybe try journaling about any of the questions offered at the end of each strategy section. Some healing requires so much feeling that we need to take great care at how much we can process at any given time. Trust your own pace with this, and don't hesitate to seek out professional support if you need it. You can choose to use a strategy, or you can choose to stop, breathe, and feel. It will really just depend. Sometimes I find that I really want to research something, I want to understand it better, I want to find a word to name it, and in that case, I really have to negotiate with myself, and I have to make an appointment with myself to feel that I'm going to keep. And I'll tell myself, okay, well, you can research this thing now, but tonight you're going to journal for an hour until you find that emotion, this emotion that I'm feeling that I don't want to feel right now, and I'm going to go into it. Or you're going to call a friend and share with her what you've been experiencing tonight or tomorrow night. One of these things, I make a date with myself and keep it, and that is really, really important and an option. My spiritual mentor, back when I lived in Bali, Dr. Bobby, whom I mentioned in my last video, would always tell me, you have got to make time to feel bad. When life is good, that's great, and enjoy it. But when stuff starts coming up for you, you can't run away from your life. You've got to run towards it. Yay, I remembered I have a light. Jeez. Sorry, guys. The day has gone by fast. Here's what I want you to remember. These coping strategies are intelligent adaptations, and they developed for very good reasons. They helped you survive difficult situations. So you're not flawed for having them. You are beautifully human. Just recognizing these strategies in yourself is a huge step forward in your healing process. You are becoming more conscious in a largely unconscious world. Every moment of recognition builds your capacity to have a choice. And each time you choose conscious processing over unconscious patterning, you're expanding your capacity to handle life's inevitable stressors. Thank you so much for watching this video and for spending your precious sacred time with me. I really enjoyed making this video. I would love if you hit like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you would like to see more of these videos. Please leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings when you were watching this video. I will read every single comment. And if you're wondering why your healing journey feels so long and nonlinear, I made an entire video on the intelligence of this process and how we are developing superpowers on this journey. You can click on it next, and I hope to see you there. And remember, your healing journey isn't going too slow. You're developing consciousness, and that is beautiful work. Love you guys. Bye.